Amid substantial pressure from Namco to deliver a 3D fighting game in the quickest time possible, the Tekken project team has succeeded in establishing their new fighting game franchise. Most fans raved at the original Tekken when it was ported over to the new system at the time called the PlayStation, solidifying it as one of the earliest hits on the console. However, as expected, the folks who worked on the original game felt they could go much further in delivering a more refined experience for the player. Any issues with gameplay mechanics, the graphics, and lore would be examined as meticulously as possible. In a quick turn of events, the sequel would be released before anyone could say "Nani?" to an even bigger response from fans and critics alike. How was the bridge between the two games built, and what did Namco have in store for us this time? My name is Aaron, and today we continue our look at the Tekken series on the channel with an incredibly memorable installment. This is A Tale of Tekken 2. Coming off the successful launch of their new 3D fighting game series with the original Tekken in 1995, Namco wasted no time in delegating the Tekken project team the task of developing this sequel. Rather than starting from scratch with a new engine and gameplay direction, the aim was to further cement Tekken's own identity by improving on what they presented initially. This proved to be a seamless transition since both games were so closely developed together. The most common issue critics had with the original Tekken was how little anything stood out, aside from the gameplay mechanics. The visuals in particular, although technically impressive at that point, were seen by detractors as lacking a sense of flow between the gameplay and its roster. Admittedly, much of the early character designs and moves do come across as random ideas thrown around in a hurry. There was also no real exclusivity between the characters and stages, as the final battle against Heihachi, for instance, could take place in Chicago during one playthrough and Venezia in the next. A lot of this was attributed to the chaotic development cycle, where several developers within the team were in charge of tons of responsibilities at once. It didn't help that many of them were dismissed under the immense pressure to deliver. With this in mind, you can understand why Namco's rush to get the game out as fast as possible had been evident in their final product. The good news was the roster was now established, so a greater focus on the art design was fair game for Tekken 2 programmer Masanori Yamada. Another aspect Namco strived to improve in, naturally, was the gameplay. While reflecting on the development for Tekken 2 in an interview with Edge magazine back in 2015, future Tekken director Katsuhiro Harada recalled, "It was only around the middle of development on Tekken 2 that we started using numerical conversion and calculation. In the original Tekken," he continued, "we had just used our senses. There was no theory at the time. In that sense, Tekken 1 isn't really a fighting game. It should be called a human body action game. They have abilities, but it's not really a martial arts game." To facilitate improvement on the gameplay, the developers closely examined why each character was fighting to be the king or queen of Iron Fist in the first place, forming a harmonious constellation between the visual presentation and gameplay. This also led to an expanded use of motion capture for the game to incorporate even more realistic martial art techniques for the characters. On top of this, any sort of exploitable mechanic from the first game was erased. With a looser and more relaxed approach in the development of the sequel, and Virtua Fighter co-creator Seiichi Ishii still at the helm as the director, Namco would quickly surprise critics and fans in a variety of ways. Tekken 2 first made its debut in the Japanese arcade scene in August 1995, a mere 4 months after the original Tekken was ported over to the PlayStation on Japanese soil. Amazingly, in North America, the story was the same. 4 months after the original game was released on the PlayStation, the sequel appeared in arcades in April 1996. Think of that. These lads over at Namco never really stopped at all in between these games, did they? It begins with a familiar face becoming increasingly angry as the short intro progresses to the visually stunning title screen. It is Heihachi, one of the many returning characters from the first game. It's viable that this is in accord with his motivation to enter the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2, which we will examine later, but I also like to believe this was emblematic of Namco's determination to deliver something special after the initial fighting game debut. Through Papa Mishima, it's as if they're saying, "Okay players, this is really our game now." The quarters are in the machine and we are brought to the character select screen. Immediately, it's clear that a ton of effort went into the visual presentation this time. Each character is more detailed and refined, with scrolling backgrounds inside their portraits encapsulating their distinct personalities. In Tekken 2, the base character total is increased to 10, with 2 new characters making their debuts.
Jun Kazama,
An officer for a wildlife organization known as the WWWC, who specializes in her own style of Kazama martial arts and possesses psychic abilities. And
Lei Wulong,
a Hong Kong police detective seeking revenge against the individual responsible for directing the international mafia to kill his partner in the police force. This is none other than Tekken's tribute to the great Jackie Chan with clever references to his films. No, I don't count
Jackass
2 as being new. The rest of the base characters make their returns from the first game, with Heihachi taking Gozuya's place. The gameplay begins and holy Aphrodite, what a difference 4 months make! The graphics were a huge step up from the first game, with each character possessing a higher polygon count. The stages themselves were now individually based around the characters, each presenting its own musical piece and mesmerizing background based on real locations. I realize the backgrounds are only JPEGs, but they still look hypnotizing to this very day, especially in the Yoshimitsu and Lei stages. The core gameplay is intact, with 1 being the left punch, 2 being the right punch, and so on. Highs, lows, and mids are still the points of impact, movement notations to perform combos are untouched, throws are still here, and even the hysterical moon jump kick is preserved. The crucial difference here is that the gameplay is much more fluid, negating that feeling of treading in quicksand the first game had. Advancing forward and backward is a lot quicker, and it takes slightly less time to bring your character to a vertical base after rough impact. The collision detection has improved, and transitions from move to move are less rigid. The replay feature now has text flashing on the top right corner of the screen. Throw breaking also makes its debut, a much needed counter opportunity to tighten up matches. These are activated by hitting the corresponding throw commands you see coming at you, so it's advisable to get familiar with each throwing animation. Certain characters like Martial Law now have up to 4 winning poses, which can be seen by holding 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the joypad respectively. And of course, each returning character added some new moves to their arsenal, such as Law's body blow flip kick or down 2-3. It's incredible how much Namco was able to improve on so much in so little time. The jump from the first game is astonishing and must have been otherworldly to experience in the mid-1990s. In Tekken 2, the player now has 10 stages to fight through in the regular arcade run, with the difficulty spiking up at around stage 5. Stage 8 is once again the sub-boss encounter, with Law now facing off against another debuting character,
Peiku Tosan,
who introduces the art of Taekwondo into the series for the first time. By this point, the computer will be throw-breaking and counter-hitting you like crazy if you're not careful. After surpassing Stage 8, players are dealt with a quick but hefty jump scare via Gozuya, staring into your soul loading screen prior to Stage 9. This still creeps me out. You know what? We really should have seen this coming after he stared into our souls in the title screen. Gozuya, now the owner of the Mishima Zaibatsu, fights you in his lair donning his iconic purple suit, with everything but the combatants and the beautiful carpet shrouded in darkness. This incredible visual is quickly interrupted by him kicking your ass if you are not ready. His ultimate tackles, Kazuya uppercuts, and hell sweeps are all a threat to take you out in a matter of seconds. As if the Stage 9 loading screen wasn't bad enough, this horrifying monstrosity rears its ugly existence into frame prior to the final stage. This loading screen would keep me up at night when I was younger. Devil Gozuya is your final opponent, providing an even greater challenge than in his non-devil form. On top of the attacks mentioned earlier, this creature is quick to dish out throws and unleash a frickin' laser beam attached to his head, okay? This yellow bolt of demonic energy can come at you in 2 different ways, one after a quick wind-up on the ground, and the other in the air. The former can thankfully be ducked, while the latter should be avoided by running towards the flying beast and dishing out a big attack when he sticks the landing. It's real easy to freeze up and eat a beam from up top when expecting a normal standing beam, since his wind-up animation is quite deceiving either way. Be sure to stay alert at all times against this thing, and for the love of Pete, practice your throw breaks. You'll thank yourself later. Once you defeat the devil, the game rewards you with a much improved montage of each of your victories as the credits roll, and yes, the ability to etch your time in stone with 3 initials. The song that accompanies this moment is a killer remix of several tracks from the original Tekken. Can you name all the songs used? Early on in Tekken 2's arcade release, a nifty feature was included. The greater the playtime on each cabinet, the more characters would be unlocked. That's right, unlike in the original arcade game, sub-bosses and boss characters were playable. As a matter of fact, demo gameplay advertises up to 23 selectable characters in Tekken 2, although technically it's slightly more than that. The familiar characters such as Wang, Kunimitsu, Lee, and Anna were all now selectable off-screen like in the PlayStation version of the original Tekken. Joining them were newcomers Bake mentioned earlier,
Bruce Irving,
a kickboxing champion who was saved by Kazuya from being killed by a tournament organizer after refusing to take a dive,
Roger, Alex,
remnants of the Mishima Zaibatsu's genetic engineering experiments with wild animals. This was a large reason why Jun entered the tournament, by the way, and
Angel,
a symbol of light looking to stifle the evil within Kazuya, although still labeled as devil in the gameplay here for some reason. Speaking of devil, the creature is now an official playable character here after initially being a tough unlockable found exclusively on the PlayStation version of the first game. Picking him will lead you to facing Jun and Angel in stages 9 and 10 respectively. Picking Kazuya will lead you to a battle against Heihachi, followed by his own dark side in the final 2 stages. And yes, Anna is still shaking those in 1995 and 1996. With over 23 characters to choose from, a smoother gameplay experience, and vastly improved visuals, Tekken 2 proved to be a massive hit for players across the world. Once the version B cabinets became more common in arcades, it was only a matter of time before Namco's new title would follow in the footsteps of its predecessor with a console port. The PlayStation version of Tekken 2 was released first in Japan in March 1996, and then released in North America in August 96. Fascinating how the game made its way to the PS1 out west, a full year after the Japanese arcade release. Unfortunately for you Galaga fans, the challenging stages are not included here. The game wastes no time in showcasing the new intro exclusively on the PlayStation. Heihachi is seen ascending the cliff his son hurled him off at the conclusion of the previous tournament, and he is not amused. One of the most captivating musical pieces in Tekken history begins shortly after, as we are presented with an incredible montage featuring different characters from the roster, new and old. The stage is set immaculately for the new fighting game experience by quickly referencing each entrant's backstory in between transitions. If ever there was an example of an intro illustrating the pageantry of the 1990s, this would certainly be one of them. Major props to Namco for providing such a vastly superior intro to the original. And yes, they included Heihachi's slow, angry face intro from your local arcade cabinet. Only here, it's accompanied by a solid arranged version of the arcade intro theme. Nice start to the port. In the beginning, the main menu appears in front of a dark background with the Tekken 2 text gradually shifting from regular gray to dark gray. Joining the familiar arcade, versus, and options modes are the new team battle, time attack, survival, and practice modes. But there are still no analog sticks for you. In the options menu, players once again have the option of listening to the newly arranged tracks of the OST or reverting back to the arcade tracks. The highest difficulty this time around is hard. No very hard or ultra hard anywhere. Quite strange. The character select screen on the PS1 version is nearly identical to the arcade version, as the scrolling backgrounds inside the character portraits are preserved. The arranged select music is so good too. Arcade mode once again provides a replica of the arcade experience straight into your home with tight controls, enhanced graphics, and a badass announcer dude.
Round 2, fight, you win. Great.
Other than a slight dip in difficulty due to the absence of the higher aforementioned difficulty settings, the arcade experience is largely the same on the PlayStation. Same amount of stages, same variety of winning poses.
You win. You win. You win.
same sub-boss encounters in Stage 8, same jump scare fuel prior to Stages 9 and 10, although it's even creepier here thanks to the legendary PS1 load times, and the same frickin' laser beams, okay? Your reward for winning the tournament with each character is once again a viewing of their endings. This time they are upgraded tremendously in visual quality, storytelling, and charm. Well, except King's ending. That one visually still looks rough, despite how moving his ending actually is. Aside from that, a majority of the endings clock in at around 30 seconds and are quite entertaining. June's ending in particular is extremely captivating as the game makes sure you know she loves animals and animals love June. Paul attempting to do Law's backflip never gets old. When all is said and done, which ending turned out to be canon? To the lore. 2 years have passed since Heihachi was defeated by his son, Kazuya, in the original tournament. The reigning King of Iron Fist has increased the Mishima Zaibatsu's power and influence on the world to new heights as its leader. However, word spreads on the possibility of Kazuya possessing an evil spirit within him after questionable endeavors by the organization became known, and the public begins to turn on him. It isn't long before the Zaibatsu responds by hosting a new tournament for an even bigger prize. During the second tournament, Kazuya comes across Jun Kazama, who has entered the tournament to arrest the reigning King of Iron Fist for smuggling wild animals. She also aimed to help the man conquer his dark side, something she sensed through her psychic abilities. Kazuya immediately noticed something different about her as she confronted him without any hesitation. Undeterred, the reigning king battles his way towards the final match and encounters his father. Yes, as illustrated in the console-exclusive intro for Tekken 2, Heihachi survived the symbolic toss down the cliff and regained his fighting spirit after a deep meditative retreat. The rematch was on, with the roles reversed, Heihachi as the main protagonist and his son as the main antagonist. Who emerged victorious? Roll the clip. Wait, as cool as that ending is, that's not what happened. Let's try that again. Kazuya, who was left stunned at the sight of his father still living, fought a losing battle, with his mind attempting to process this revelation. The new King of Iron Fist then tossed his son inside the crater of an active volcano. Ladies and gentlemen, the Mishima family. While all this occurred, June sensed every bit of it and is left alone and pregnant with Kazuya's child. They got busy! The credits roll after the endings, and the track in the background is sung beautifully by the voice actress of future Tekken character Asuka Kazama, Ryoko Shiraishi. If this song doesn't give you chills, you are probably a jack. The trickiest unlockable characters would have to be Roger and Alex. In order to get them, you need to have your health at 5% before you defeat your opponent in the final round during Stage 3. If you do it right, you should hear the announcer say, "Great!" As tedious as this can be to pull off correctly, it's possible to stumble into the fight against the animals in Stage 4 on accident, not knowing about this beforehand. Once you complete arcade mode with all the characters, the main menu will then appear like the title screen from the arcade version, with Kazuya's demonic eye staring at your soul. Another cool feature is most of the sub-boss stages feature reused tracks from the original Tekken, including Monument Valley for Armor King, the stadium theme for Bruce, King George Island for Anna, Chicago for Lee, and Acropolis for Kuma. Unfortunately, the lone track missing in Tekken 2 is Venezia. Namco, that song is great. What the hell? My assumption for this is Bake receiving his own legit theme like the rest of the base characters, both in the arcades and on the console ports. Venezia probably would have been his stage theme otherwise. Team battle time! In this mode, players are allowed to select up to 8 characters in a Royal Zaibatsu Rumble to the death. Hitting the start button activates the all-random selection, providing a fun time for anyone playing alone or against another human. How priceless is this? Bruce versus Lee. I love Tekken. She won't beat me with law, she won't beat me with law, she won't beat me with crap, she beat me with law. The final results are summarized in a funny way when the dust settles. Time attack is where the bragging can begin by completing all 10 stages as quickly as possible. Strangely, the jump scare loading screens with Gozoya and Devil are not presented during this mode. I wonder why. Once you complete your sprint, the results are accompanied by an arranged version of the results theme from the arcade version during the Big KO montage, as long as you have the arranged tracks activated in the options. Afterwards, your time is saved with the help of your initials. Survival mode. This is where you battle the computer until you die. Health is partially revitalized as you increase the victory count. Another fun mode that ends exactly as Time Attack does, as long as your final tally ranks somewhere. Finally, the highly welcomed practice mode allows players the freedom to work on combos, defensive maneuvers, and movement. The new command list shows quite a few moves each character can perform, but certainly not all of them. PS1 limitations perhaps? Something funny happens if you stay idle for a while. The character you choose will eventually start daydreaming. Staying idle even longer will prompt the game to say enough of this crap by starting a countdown to reset back to the main menu. And believe it or not, the funny stuff doesn't end there. By holding the select button as you choose your character, Big Head Mode is activated.
You win.
This leads to the character you choose increasing in size and voice pitch. It's possible to play in Super Big Head Mode too. You can also play from a first-person perspective via wireframes mode by holding down the L1 and L2 buttons as you select your character. This is a trippy experience that provides an extra challenge for anyone, amplified by the humorous realization that you are kicking ass with a bunch of green lines. It's stuff like this that makes the game so thrilling to come back to no matter how many years go by. When it comes to the OST in Tekken 2, I definitely feel this was also a huge step up from the first game. I love both the arcade and arranged soundtracks tremendously. There are so many good tracks to choose from on either side of the playing field. Some of my favorites are arranged lay. Arranged Michelle. Arcade Law. Arcade Heihachi. And arranged Gozoya. Tekken 2 was and still is an incredible game. The amount of ground Namco was able to cover in improving their original experience in such a short time span is mind-blowing. The controls adjust nicely to the more fluid experience. Throw breaks were needed and thankfully began here. The variety of characters available is fantastic for a game that was initially released in 1995. The new challengers all successfully made their way into the series, with their influences being included at some capacity for years to come. Well, at least until Tekken 7 came along. Rest easy, Roger and Alex. The battles against Gozuya and Devil in the final two stages are some of the most memorable moments of the entire series. The music backing up the action on both versions is tremendous. Best of all, it really seemed like Namco succeeded in perfecting the series' own identity, as everything now flowed so well together. Fans responded by making the game one of the most popular arcade titles from the era, and one of the best-selling PlayStation games of all times, at 5.7 million units sold worldwide. Reviews were through the roof, with further critical acclaim. It was now abundantly clear the Tekken series was a force to be reckoned with. With such incredible results, Namco knew what to do. Harada-san recalled. That's when the team finally sat down and said, "Hey, this is something that might continue for some time."